Hi, I'm Cara Infante, and this is Bookish Flights. In each episode, I chat with one bookish guest as we take some time to sample and savor the pairing recommendations from their bookish flight. We hope to give you suggestions to cultivate your TBR list and nurture your leisure time through books. In today's episode, I am chatting with Clémence Michallon. Clémence is an author and a journalist. Her debut thriller, The Quiet Tenant, was published in June 2023 and is an international bestseller. Blumhouse TV has acquired the adaptation rights. Her next thriller, Our Last Resort, came out yesterday. She was a staff writer at The Independent for 5 years and is now a freelance journalist. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, I feel like we are so much more than our bios. So why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are?
Yes, so thank you so much for this introduction as well. Let's see. So I'm Clémence. I am originally a French person, and I have been in the US now for 11 years, actually. I
Okay.
came summer of 2014.
Wow.
I Yeah, I came as a student and I was only supposed to stay for a year, but then I met a guy and I found a job and I got married and it's been 11 years and I'm still here. And I'm a naturalized US citizen now. I have dual citizenship. Um, so that's how I got here. And
Yeah.
then I was a staff journalist for a decade, give or take, and I still am a journalist, but now I went freelance a bit more than a year ago
Okay.
because with the books and the journalism, it was a little hard to do everything all at once, all the time.
Yeah, I can't
Uh,
imagine.
so it was, and it was okay for a while, but I wrote my first novel, The Quiet Tenant, really at the height of COVID. And then life started up again.
Yeah.
And it became hard to have a full-time job and write books and be published, because then there's more to do once you're published.
Yeah.
And just do regular things on top. So I went freelance a bit more than a year ago, and it's become easier to balance my schedule. And the last thing I should mention is I'm actually very excited to say you did mention that Blumhouse TV has acquired the adaptation rights for The Quiet Tenant, and I am also at liberty to say that they've also acquired the adaptation rights for Our Last Resort. So,
Yes.
which
Congratulations.
thank you very much. They have been so great to work with, and I'm so excited.
I, out of episode 154 came out this morning, and I'm like, I don't know that I have interviewed an author that has acquired, like their book has acquired TV rights and adaptations.
Really, yeah, it's that stuff is I feel like really lucky because adaptations are hard,
Yeah.
and you never know if it's going to happen.
Yeah. I guess I've had one that I know for a fact her book was, but it has yet to come to fruition.
Right, right, right. Yeah, you just never know if you're going to get an option. It's all very, but it's been really fun. And
Yeah. So I guess I have one more question about this. So they acquire the adaptation rights. So that doesn't mean it's actually picked up, but they are just right now have the ability to adapt it for that.
right, yeah. I
Okay.
mean, every deal can differ, right? Like people get anything can happen basically, but the way it works is an an option means that then they start developing it.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm like, again, like this is a whole new world. I haven't had someone on.
It is. I know it is. And it's the kind of stuff you kind of like learn by doing and you just like, yeah, I
Uh,
ask a lot of questions.
how much do you get to be involved in the process if it does go to option?
Well, I'm attached as an executive producer,
Okay.
so I do get to be involved and you know be in the room or the virtual room,
Yeah.
and sort of chime in and help however I can, basically.
Yeah. I can't imagine what that would be like. I've asked many authors, what's it like to hear the audiobook of your book, right? Which, because I think that brings to life your own novel and even for the reader, but as the writer. And so I can't imagine actually visually seeing it then as well.
Yeah, that must be really, really wild.
Yeah.
Yeah. It must be a complete out of body experience. The author Paul Tremblay, who's also he's great and he's a friend of mine. His book, And now I'm getting confused between the title of the book, the title of the movie. And he would be furious. The, the book is called The Cabin at the End of the World. And it
Oh,
became the
yes.
movie Knock at the Cabin from Night Shyamalan. And he wrote about, seeing the movie, and I think it was just really intense. It sounded really like a really out of body experience, basically.
Yes. Yeah, like one of those moments. I have those like sometimes I'm like, just the other day, it was like, I have published 153 podcast episodes. It's like, pinch me. You have these moments of like, wow, I did that. Even though in the day to day, you do it, but it's just, you take a
Yes.
step back and you're like, wow. So,
But that reminds me of what it's like to write a novel,
yeah.
because I think for me, the biggest fallacy is, so I'm a word count girl. And so I give myself a daily word count and then I do it
Okay.
and everything's fine. But it used to not be that big of a word count when I was still working
Sure.
full time employee as an employee. Um, it used to be 500 to 1,000 words a day. And it hasn't like gone incredibly much higher, but these days I can do 1,500 words a day.
Sure.
Um, but 500 words a day was a word count that I could easily reach. Um, but in a way, it didn't feel big enough to one day amount to anything of substance, right? To amount to anything as life-changing as a novel, or that then becomes a book
Yeah.
and goes on to have a good life. But it does. It all adds up. And similarly, I think with you with the podcast, it's, you just put in the work day in and day out and it adds up. And there you are, with
Yeah.
all of these episodes to look back on.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I love that analogy, of just, you just show up every day, right?
You just show up.
Yeah. And you do
It's
that.
the whole job.
Absolutely. Well, for listeners that maybe haven't gotten to pick up Our Last Resort yet, why don't you go ahead and tell them a little bit about it?
Yes. Our last resort, seen here,
It's so pretty.
is thank you. I love the cover. We were talking about it before we started recording, and I always say like I can say because I didn't design it. I think the cover's amazing. I think
Yes.
they did a really good job.
Go take a look, listeners.
And as long as we're doing show and tell, under the cover, it's this beautiful shade of purple.
Oh, yes. Yeah. See, I read it on my Kindle, so I don't get to see
Thank
that.
you. We have to send you a copy, but yeah, the purple hat is my favorite color. So I was very excited when I got to notice that. So now that we know it looks good, what's inside?
Yes.
um, our last resort is the story of Frida and Gabriel, who are two adults who go to this beautiful hotel in the desert in Utah to try to rekindle their sibling relationship. They've sort of fallen out of touch for a number of years, and they're trying to have this reunion. And everything's going fine, not perfectly well, but fine, until a few days into their stay, a female guest turns up dead, evidently murdered. And suspicion is going to quickly fall on Gabriel, who a number of years ago was suspected of murdering his own wife. That's why he and Frida had this falling out. Um, as suspicion falls on Gabriel, Frida is going to have to reckon with some secrets from their past that they hoped to leave behind, because Frida and Gabriel share a difficult past. They both grew up in a cult together. So the novel is told in dual timelines. One timeline spans years, possibly decades, and chronicles their past in the cult and everything that happened there. And the other spans days and is set at the hotel, and it's the contemporary murder investigation and its consequences for our two lead characters.
Yes, I loved it and I flew through it. And maybe that like timeline of the days, it was like I just had to know what was happening. So then like, oh, come on, I gotta know.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I have to say, like everything about starting a novel, I started it with an incredible amount of naivete, which I think is necessary to start anything. And so I thought, well, my previous thriller, The Quiet Tenant, was multiple points of view. This time I'm going to do dual timelines. And one of my favorite crime novels is Luckiest Girl Alive by Jessica Knoll. And it is a dual timeline novel, and she does it so well, and she makes it look easy.
I could do that.
With like this bit of complete hubris. Like, I think I could do that. It's like, it's really hard as it turns out, but it was really, I like it when it's a little, I like it because I like to stretch myself as a writer. I like to try new things. And I always like when I finish a novel to feel like I've learned something new. And that was definitely the case here. Because it is such an interesting exercise to try to write these characters as children and then as adults. You have to make sure you write the adults that would grow out of these children. And then
Yeah.
likewise, you have to write the children that would become these adults. And it's really fun to get to know them on that level. And it was very very formative.
Yeah. I love that you're talking about, kind of getting in the minds of the characters because I think as readers, it's not being a writer myself, but when we feel we can, kind of identify with the character or we see a bit of ourselves in the character, right? And it sounds like even in the writing bit, like you're getting some of that as well as you're developing them.
Yes, absolutely. Actually, it's interesting that you mentioned this because I have a little trick that I perform when I'm writing. Whenever there's a character with whom I'm kind of who's kind of remaining a mystery to me, like it's kind of just difficult to wrap my head around them for various reasons. I give them a characteristic that I share,
Ah,
um, like a similar taste, and it's super small things.
yeah,
But for example, in my previous book, The Quiet Tenant, it's a serial killer story, and obviously, sort of getting to know the serial killer character on that level was a little difficult. So
sure.
I gave him a couple of things, right?
I could
He
see
really
why.
liked, right, exactly. It was like, inside his head is quite an intense place to be. And I didn't really know how to relate to that. So it was very simple, but I gave him blue eyes and blonde hair. And like, that's what I have too. And he drinks cherry Coke. And that's my favorite flavor. It's little things like that. It sounds silly, but it creates a bridge,
Yeah.
right? Um, and with Our Last Resort, a character who took his time revealing himself to me was Gabriel. And I made Gabriel, this is not a spoiler, but he's a huge Roman Empire nerd. And I studied Latin and Roman civilization for 8 years.
Okay.
Not at the college. I mean, actually 1 year at the college level, and then before that it was high school and middle school. But it was a big part of my life for almost 10
Yeah.
years, and that enabled me to kind of relate to him at least on that level. It's just creating that little door, that you can open and have a passageway into their psyche. So there are bits of myself in the characters.
Yeah. And I think that that is what, I mean, no two people are the same, right? Because we all have these various maybe studies or hobbies or things that we're into, and then you can infuse your version of that in your novel or whatever is your creative medium that you're doing. And I think that's it's like, again, you sit back and you're like, that is so amazing that we have that.
Totally. And it's so much fun too. And you get to kind of like scratch various itches doing it as well. Some things are big, some things are small. But for example, my main character in this book, Frida, um, well, she has a big difference with me, which is that she's really good with numbers. And like I'm okay with numbers, but I'm not it's not like intuitive for me.
Sure.
Um, but so it was interesting to live vicariously through her actually in that regard,
Yeah.
someone who's really good at math, who gets as excited about numbers as I do words.
Yeah.
But also you get to kind of like do minor stuff. So Frida, we learn she lived kind of an isolated life, at least at the beginning of the novel when they arrived at the hotel. She has a very structured life, structured routine. She is a day trader, but she works for herself. That was a trip to research. I ended up on these Reddit boards with all like the investor bros.
Yeah.
Pretty like 5 a.m. I wake up, I cold plunge. I was like, okay. Um, and she rock climbs. She does indoor rock climbing, which I've done a few times and I've always liked it. She does it better though because she does it regularly
Yeah.
instead of once every 5 years. And also, Frida has a little car that she enjoys driving on the roads of upstate New York. And that was me projecting my own stuff. But a fun little tidbit is that she has a Fiat 500. And I bought my very first car a year ago, and I always wanted a Beetle convertible.
Yep.
And so that's what I got, right? Like you always, you have to get, when you've wanted a car for years and years and it's affordable, like you
Yeah.
should stay up with that idea. But I almost changed my mind at the last minute and got a Fiat 500. And so instead I gave it to Frida.
There you
Cool
go.
things like that, you know?
So, who was your favorite character to write in this novel?
Ooh, that is such a good question. I actually think that it became, I really enjoyed writing Gabriel.
Okay.
He's one
Even
of
though
those
it took a
characters.
bit. I love it.
It took
Yeah.
a bit, but he was worth the wait. I mean, obviously, I really enjoyed writing Frida. She's the main character. I spent the most time in
Sure.
her head. Uh, but it, Gabriel ended up being a character who revealed interesting sides of himself to me.
Yeah.
And he was a bit of a cipher for a long time. And I don't, this is going to sound silly, but I believe in signs because I think that signs are just like what you choose to see and then like just reflect your own
Yeah.
mind back to you. And it was just this thing where I'm a runner. I run a lot of road races in New York City. And a few of them go on Central Park South, which is like the name suggests, the avenue, the street that goes at the south of Central Park.
Sure.
And there's a restaurant there called Gabriel. And every time I ran past it, I was like, he's calling out to me. It's trying to tell me something.
Come back
There's
to me.
something about Gabriel I need to figure out when it's done. It was just a small thing. But yeah,
I
I
love
think
that.
he was right.
Yes. Well, what have you learned about yourself through writing?
I've learned through writing that I am actually capable of patience.
Mm.
Um, it is not a quality that I have naturally, and it's which is interesting because almost the only thing you need to be a working writer is patience.
Hmm.
Um, Patience with yourself, patience with the work, and patience with others. Patience with the people you work with, patience with
Right.
readers, um, patience with the process. Even people who write fast, it doesn't feel fast every day. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like the
Yeah.
fastest working writers, they'll do a book a year, and that's extremely fast, right? I find that mind-boggling. That still means you're like spending 1 year working on the same project.
Yeah.
So patience is a prerequisite, and it is not a quality I have at all naturally. When I was a kid, it was really hard for me to sit in one place. I had a reputation for like sitting down to read a book and then going to do something else. Or I think that part of it is just being a kid. This was all before I was seven
Yeah.
years old. So, but I wanted to try everything. I was very curious, and so that makes it hard to be patient when you want to do everything, you know? And when I started writing, I realized that I could actually stick with the same thing for a long time. And I think a big part of how I taught myself to do that was by running, actually. Um, I often say that I don't think I could be a novelist if I weren't also a marathon runner.
Interesting. Okay.
Um, yeah, I think so. I started running distances before I started writing novels.
Okay.
Um, and it really is the activity that taught me physically in my bones, in my body, that if you keep showing up, not every day, because I don't run every day, but with some regularity, and you just do a little effort,
Yeah.
it adds up over time. Because when you train for a marathon, you don't run the full distance.
Yeah.
You just run shorter distances. You go up to 20 miles. A marathon is 26.2 miles for
Yeah.
our listeners who are blessed to not have done this, who are not insane. and, that's what taught me that, it really does happen. It really does pay off.
Yeah.
and
And
you
I
can
feel like
trust
you
the
also
process.
have to do that focused activity for a long time. I mean, it's no small
Yes,
feat to go run 20 miles. I mean, that you're going to be at it for a while.
exactly. And your only job is to keep going. That was also a
Yeah.
big lesson. It's, you don't, I personally, there are more talented runners than I, but I don't try to run well when I'm just trying to run,
Yeah.
and on marathon day or on the day that you run your 20-mile training run, your only job, the only goal is to keep putting one foot in front of the other. And
Yeah.
that really helped me, when you're writing the first draft, your only job is to keep writing words and you'll figure out what to do.
Yeah. I now that you've explained that, I could see where that would all make sense. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. Let's switch gears a little bit and let's talk about who you are as a reader. What genres do you enjoy reading?
So I am an avid reader. I am kind of always reading if it's physically possible. I will read while brushing my teeth. I will read while eating. I will listen to books. I really try to read a lot. In terms of genres, I think that if you looked at my reading list, you would see half crime fiction, obviously. It's my favorite thing to read.
Yeah.
I love a literary thriller. Um, and then the other half would be probably literary fiction.
Okay.
Um, I I've always been drawn to it. I went to school in France. It's what we were made to read, for school. So I've kept up. And then if you make these two small halves, then you can add horror as well. I love horror. And a bit of nonfiction and a bit of poetry as well. I find poetry is really good to kind of get unstuck and remember just kind of getting out of my own head.
Yeah.
Because so much of writing crime fiction is you have to focus on the plot and make everything propulsive. And
Sure.
it's all about like, writing in service of the mechanics of the story.
Yeah.
And then poetry takes a completely different approach. And I like, it's healthy sometimes to take a little walk outside of your own head.
Yeah. Do you ever get, I mean, like imagining, I'm like thinking freelance journalism and a writer and a reader. Do you ever get like word fatigue? Or you're like, oh, I don't know.
Not really,
Okay.
but I'm lucky because I speak two languages. And I think I do experience what you just referred to. And when that happens, I read in French.
Okay.
Yeah, I actually, when I'm tired or something does click where I'm like, oh my God, this is a lot. And usually that's when I'm like, let me just read something in French.
Yeah.
And it resets.
Okay. Oh, that's a great. I love that.
Yeah, it's fun. And I read faster in French than I do in English too. Mostly I read in English because I
Yeah.
need to read it in order to be able to write it. I write in English. So,
Sure.
it's I have to stay in touch with the language like that. But every once in a while, there's a little shower for a little rinse for my brain. I'll read
Yes.
in French.
Do you, I asked my husband this because he learned Spanish before he learned English. Do you, like in your head, do you think in English or French? Or like can, translate between the two?
In my head, I think think in English now most of the
Okay.
time because I most of my life happens in English.
Sure.
If I go back to France, then that will start changing. I can't still switch to French. Like that
Yeah.
it hasn't gone because I grew up in France. I was born and raised in France for the first like more than 20 years of my life. So it hasn't gone away, but I do think in English, and I think I dream in English as well, at least some of the
Yeah. And I imagine that I've never gotten to that point of being fluent in a language, but I imagine in my mind, I would think if I'm dreaming in this language that I'm learning, then I made it.
I totally agree. Dreaming and swearing, actually, because that little exclamation of surprise or annoyance
Yes.
or pain, it's a very spontaneous form of speech.
Yeah.
And the first time that like I heard myself, I don't know if I like dropped something or burned myself, and the first time you say it in English instead of your native language, you're like, it's become quite ingrained.
Yeah, exactly. It's like that automatic reaction is in English. I could see that. Well, you have been so gracious to bring a book flight with you today. Can you tell us how you chose these books?
Yes. Oh, I was so excited to do this. I love talking about books. Well, the way I chose my books was, first of all, you very helpfully sent a document that had a lot of tasks to
I've
flights on
considered
it.
trimming it down to be like maybe just send you 50. I don't know if it felt overwhelming.
No, it was great. I
Okay.
loved it. I want more, if anything. No, I loved the document. So I looked at every like it was just so helpful to see all the past picks
Yeah,
in one place and to see how creative people were with the themes and stuff. I actually I'm a Libra and we have a deserved reputation for being unable to pick between two things because we're and so I ended up deciding to do books about cults and family. Not both at once, just
sure.
like some about cults, some about family. Because cults and family are two big themes, the driving themes of Our Last Resort. And it was kind of fun to look back at books that feed into the same um,
Yes.
dynamics.
Yes. Well, I am super excited. What's the first book you brought today?
Okay, the first book I brought is The Girls by Emma Cline. I actually read this book years ago when it first came out, and I haven't reread it since. But clearly, I still, it still made a mark because it
Yeah.
was like the first book that came up for me when I decided on those. And actually, when I like read up on it again to kind of refresh my memory
Sure.
for this podcast, I realized I really need to reread it. It's a phenomenal novel. I love it. So, The Girls by Emma Cline tells the story of a girl who one day sees a group of other girls and it like outside in a park. And she's very mesmerized by them and she's intrigued and she is going to want to get closer to them. And then it turns out those girls live on a ranch. And this is all happening in California in the 60s.
Okay.
And the novel is inspired by Charles Manson's family
Oh,
and the family murders. And
yeah.
so you can kind of tell that we're heading towards some kind of violent end, but it's one of those books, as I remember it, that was very hypnotic and ominous and mysterious.
I love that.
Um, oh, it was so good. And I picked it because for me, it was a book that made me realize a few things. First of all, that a book could be, well, no, I mean, I had realized this before, but it's a book that exemplified for me the power of a literary crime novel and the power that prose can have when you're trying to tell a crime story. Yes,
Yeah.
it is about story, it is about plot, it is about character, but the writing is also a tool. It's not
I love
just
it.
like something that is secondary. It's a tool that can serve those things. It's also a book that taught me that stories of girlhood can be sort of widely viewed as exciting and intriguing and worthy of our attention. I'm not saying, it's a lesson that I could have learned elsewhere, but this
Sure.
was the book that exemplified it.
Yeah. And I think that I say at the end of the show, the quote is, books come into our life when we most need them. And, this is the book that came into your life to show you that at that time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that sort of also clarified it in my head, right? Like I think obviously other crime novels that I had read had wonderful prose, right? Like I had read Agatha Christie.
Sure.
You have great examples everywhere, but sometimes you read the right book at the right time and you're like, oh,
And
you
it
can
just like
verbalize it to
imprints on
yourself.
you.
Yes, exactly. So I imprinted on the girls. I'm a climb and it just stayed with me. And now I really want to reread it and I will. Um, yeah, but it was
Yes.
it was obviously when you're going to write a book about a cult, I think you're going to be in conversation basically.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, I am adding this one to my list. And I always love reading these like thriller crime fiction in the summer. I don't know what it is about summer to me, but I love a page turner in the summer.
Yes, absolutely. There is something about summer reading that lends itself to it. I also love that kind of like page turning, but kind of sticky, atmospheric,
Yeah.
read in the summer is so good.
Yes. So that was The Girls by Emma Cline. What's the next book you brought today?
Well, actually, speaking of uh, sticky atmospheric reads, the second book I brought is a book called Talking to the Dead by Helen Dunmore.
Okay.
And we were saying it's kind of a like a for I think it's really underrated, this book. Like I had never heard of it before,
Yeah,
and
me either.
I read it. It's so good. I read it on the recommendation of my editor, and it is stunning. And it's one of those books where after I finished it, I told my mother, I was like, yeah, it's going to be so up your alley. And she found it in French. And she was like, oh my God, it's so good. I should give it a read. So, Talking to the Dead, great title, by Helen Dunmore, is a book that is set in the UK during a very, very sweltering summer.
Okay.
And it's one of those books where basically you put all the characters in a little uh in a little enclosed situation. You kind of like watch them do their
Yeah.
messed up stuff. So it's about a woman called Mina, and she's a photographer, and she visits her sister who just had a baby, and secrets from the past kind of hover over them, and their dynamics are messed up, but you can't really tell what's going on. And there's some stuff going on with the husband as well. As you can tell, I'm really good at summarizing plot, by the way.
Read this book.
Read this book. There's one of those where you can tell that something messed up happened in the past and that something messed up is going to happen. But again, you don't know what it is. But there is something completely hypnotic about the prose and the atmosphere and the fact that the characters kind of show you that they're messed up people. You just keep reading. And I think it's interesting because this is a quality that you find in so many of the best books. Lisa Jewell, for example, in the crime area, is a master of
Yeah.
just like putting these really interesting characters in a situation, and you don't really know what's going to happen, but you know it's going to be messed up, and you're dying to figure it out. And this was one of those. It was Talking to the Dead was really, uh, it was so well done.
Okay.
It's a masterpiece.
Wonderful. Well, that was Talking to the Dead by Helen Dunmore. And then what's the next book you brought?
Okay, the next book I brought is a complete change of atmosphere. It's called My Brother by Karen Smirnoff.
Okay.
And it is a novel that is set in a very cold land. It's not sweltering at all. It is set in rural Sweden.
Okay.
And there is this woman, I probably not going to pronounce the names correctly here because I don't. Her name is Jana, possibly. And she returns to the small farmhouse where her brother lives to see him. His name is Roar, and he is not doing well, the brother. He's drinking, he is not in a good shape. And this book is one where you can tell that the two siblings share a dark, brutal past, but you don't know exactly what happened. But you can tell it's affecting the way they're behaving in the present
Yeah.
very much. And so obviously this is a book that I read while I was working on Our Last Resort because I wanted to read a story of siblings who are trying to have a kind of a family relationship while still needing to cope with some heavy stuff from.
Yeah.
And it was so good. I loved this book. The prose is so unique. It's beautifully translated from
Okay.
the Swedish. I really loved it. And I recommend it. Karen Smirnoff is also the author who wrote the Millennium series like sequel, like The Girl in the Eagle's Talons,
Yeah.
with the Lisbeth Salander
Yeah.
novels.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Okay.
she's good.
I didn't put that together. So I'm glad you said that. So that was My Brother by Karen Smirnoff. And then
Yes,
you have been so gracious to bring a dessert pairing with you today.
that's right. I have a dessert pairing. This is a book that I could not stop talking about a few months
I
ago.
love those.
Um, Oh, so good. And it occurred to me if our theme is cults and family, this one really falls into the family. It's Piglet by Lottie Hazel.
Okay.
I apologize if I don't pronounce her name correctly. She is a British author. Piglet is a contemporary literary novel. It is about a woman known to her family as Piglet,
Wow.
and to us, the reader,
Yeah.
or Pig, affectionately. And she is set to be married in a few weeks, and she works at a publishing house in London. And her wedding is coming up, and a couple of weeks before the wedding, her fiance reveals to her a secret uh, about something that he did. And from then, Piglet starts coping in her own way, which manifests in the way that she eats. And it's very particular, and it is so well done. It's a literary novel that I think is written like a thriller,
Okay.
and like in terms of the shape of it and the feel of it when you read it, and it is so brilliant. I find the characters so well depicted, the family dynamics, that there's a bit of, friendships and class and all that stuff. And I thought it was so good. I read it and then I listened to it. But I'm a rare rereader because there's so many books I'm trying to get to.
Oh, yeah.
This is, it's so, 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 so good. I loved it.
Okay, so that was Piglet by Lottie Hazel. And I'm feeling for you as you're talking about this because it's really hard to talk about these books without dropping, a spoiler. And so I feel like it is, you're like, oh, okay, I'm trying to explain these books and it's just read them. But it is so hard to talk about, this versus like maybe a historical novel or a romance, like you really don't want to give the spoiler in these.
It's really hard. And I feel like I should be better at it because, you have to give the set up basically. And that's really my whole job is figuring out like what triggers a story. I should really be better at summarizing books, but I'll keep working on
Oh,
it.
no,
It's
I meant
really
that as a
hard.
compliment because I feel for you that it is hard to do that.
No, that's how I took it, but I agree, it's really hard. And it's one of those things where sometimes I think it's easier to talk about how a book makes you
Yeah.
um you know than what actually happens in it.
I realized I rate books on how they make me feel. Like
Yeah.
I usually give myself at least 24 hours before I really think about what I'm going to do because I feel like you're so in what you felt from the novel at 24 hours, but then like by the next day I kind of think about it and what resonated with me and it kind of can dig in more versus how it made me feel.
Yeah, I think that's smart. Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Well, thank you so much for bringing those books with you today. I really appreciate that. How I love to end our show is with our bonus pairings, and it's a speed round of questions you can answer really quick. Well, you've already kind of answered this, I guess, but are you a rereader?
I used to be, and now I'm not anymore.
Yeah. What is one book you've read that has changed your life?
The Fever by Megan Abbott. It changed my life as a writer, as a
Okay.
reader.
Where is your favorite place to read?
My living room chair or couch, depending on how much furniture I have. Because I just moved. In the morning with a cup of coffee.
Sounds like a great way to start the day. Lastly, what are you reading next?
You've got me at such an interesting time because I just finished the book I was reading this morning.
Yay.
I just finished Kill Your Darlings by Peter Swanson, and it was great.
Yes.
Next soon, I'm just waiting for it to come out. I want to read the next Lisa Jewell, Don't Let Him In, uh,
Okay.
which as we're recording, it's coming out next week.
Yeah.
So I'm
So,
gonna have to,
listeners, yeah, you'll be able to pick it up by the time we come out with this episode next month.
yeah. And I love Lisa Jewell's books. She just never misses, and I can't wait for
Yes. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show with me today. I know your time is precious and I appreciate all you've given me.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Likewise, I know your time is precious and I really appreciate the chance to chat. And also, thank you for your great questions. This was so fun.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for listening to this episode today with Clémence Michallon, including her book flight of books that feature cults and family. We'd love to hear what books you'd pair with this book flight at bookishflights.com. If you enjoyed the show, please head over to Apple Podcasts and leave a review. Your review not only helps the show, but it also helps the podcast to reach others. Make sure you are subscribed on Apple Podcasts or Spotify to make sure you will not miss an episode. That's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. As Emma Thompson said, I think books are like people in the sense that they'll turn up in your life when you most need them. Cheers to you, dear readers. Until next time.